Hey, this is David Wolinsky bringing you another interview from the archives of NoDon'tDie.com. This time I'm bringing you the first half of my conversation with Archie Prakash, who's a game developer in Los Angeles. He and I spoke on September 22nd, 2015. If you'd like to read a full transcript of our conversation, you can please check the link below, and also below you'll see a link to my Patreon, where your help and support helps me continue on with this project. Thanks.
Sure. My real name is Archie Prakash, but everyone calls me Archie. That's a whole other story in itself. But I currently live in Los Angeles. I'm originally from New England, Connecticut, and I've always been playing video games. And as far as back as I can remember, I always wanted to make video games, and I'm kind of happy that I'm getting to do something like that still.
Yeah.
It's just always been kind of like playing video games has been kind of an outlet for me. And then eventually, like, I'm one of those like kind of DIY persons that like if I want to see something, I'll just go make it. And like learning every bit about the game, like the game process is something that really like resonates with me. Like doing the art, the design, the programming, just every bit of having a hands-on. And it's sometimes rough because, like, the industry wants you to just do one thing. And, you know, I understand that in, like, a production sort of pipeline, like, you kind of just have to be the modeler or the guy that does the textures or the programming. But, like, for someone that's really curious about all aspects of the industry, there's not very much jobs like that out there. So you kind of have to start making your own games. And it's kind of interesting. We live in a time that you can do that. And the barrier of entry for making games is getting lower and lower. And for people to just like be able to tell their stories and kind of like put their ideas and create it in such a short amount of time, you know, even like the 10 years that I've kind of been in the industry, like the changes that have occurred are just mind blowing, really.
Have you worked in the game industry proper, which I don't really know how you would define that, but I think you know what I'm sort of asking.
Yeah, I worked at Electronic Arts, was my first job when I moved out to Los Angeles. I kind of was like an assistant artist, but again, that job was also at the time where EA Spouse came out, which was a huge scandal about how like the workers at Electronic Arts were just getting kind of worked to death, and literally someone died, and then one of the spouses at Electronic Arts kind of wrote this email saying how like she does not see her husband ever, and how, you know, how it's affecting their family life and so forth. And, you know, at the same time, I was working at EA at the time, and I had been living in Los Angeles for about a year, and all I did was get up, go to work, come home, and go back to bed, you know, and literally this was like 7 days sometimes out of the week. And I was like, this is not right. This is terrible. And it's all under the assumption that, you know, I'm willing to do whatever they tell me to do because I love video games. You know?
Oh, wait, how old were you at that time?
I was 23, I think.
So you were 23 and you were able to have that realization that like maybe this isn't right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually like a pretty remarkable thing. I mean, I worked at a media outlet that was transitioning to the internet, and I went through the same thing, and I think it took me until I was like 26 to realize that. And I was like, I just started noticing like, how come my friends have like full-time jobs but also free time?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think a lot, like, especially when you're younger, you kind of want to, like, get your foot in the door, and that means, like, yeah, I'll take a hit and do what it takes to make something happen. And, you know, I think, like, maybe it's just because, like, you know, I don't really put up with a lot of crap, so I just, like, when I see it, I tend to, like, just speak up, and to the detriment of myself sometimes, where, you know, it gets me in trouble, but at the end of the day, it's like, you know, I'm glad I said something because, you know, someone had to say it. So, like, eventually I kind of, like, just, like, up and quit EA. And then I took some odd end jobs at Disney, and then eventually I kind of just went like full time freelance for the VFX and motion graphics industry, which was kind of like similar to games, but it really let you set your own hours, which was like, I'll work for a time and then I'll take off for a time. I'll work for a time and then I'll take off for a time. And that like really like resonated with me. And then really helped me like get my chops up as far as like, you know, working in different aspects of like 3D and art and production and so forth. And I thought it was a way better like learning environment than games would have provided me, if anything.
So what was it like being at EA while EA Spouses was happening?
I mean, like overall, it was a neat place to work, and it was really awesome to. I was working on Lord of the Rings: Battle for Middle Earth, and then also one of the Medal of Honor games. I think Pacific Assault. It's a little fuzzy, but
It sounds right.
Yeah.
That's like the sort of game they would have made at that time.
Yeah, and it's because like it was such a huge building at the time, and a lot of the people I meet even today are always like, "Oh, I used to work there as well," and it's like we shared the same office. It's funny how like I barely knew any of these people, so it's like even within that group of people, you're so like stuck in your own little like development group. And you were working so hard, you barely got to meet anyone outside of the building, which is kind of weird to me.
I mean, was there like? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I mean, like, but overall, it was like it was a good environment. Like, I didn't like felt like I got treated badly or anything, but like it was just like, you know, there was just an unspoken word that was like, yeah, you have to work yourself to the bone here or leave. You know, like. And a lot of people did leave, and, you know, I think maybe for the better. And it's sad even if you go by that office building today, it's like basically gutted, and that whole studio is kind of like barely on a respirator, if anything.
Yeah. I mean, did you... I don't know. Sometimes I'm so next level nihilism about my feelings about the industry that sometimes I wonder if there even actually is an industry. Like, it seems like there's some sort of missing connective tissue. And I talk to people who have worked in AAA in the past or who do presently, and it sort of has this feeling of like there's just a bunch of disparate companies making similar products, but there's no like industry-wide cohesion. Do you ever get that feeling, or am I talking crazy?
You mean like a collegial like togetherness? You mean like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if like E3 really counts, or GDC really counts. You know,
is like if anything like the place where you go meet, as far as developers are concerned, right? Like. That's where you go meet other developers. But I think E3 is just kind of a showcase and really for like fans to come out, especially these days, you know, like it's crazy. It's like I've been going to E3 for like 10 years now, and like it used to be very industry based. Now I see like people cosplaying and like, you know, it's becoming kind of like Comic-Con, but still you need to have credentials to get in, which I think is very funny. Like, but still everyone seems to get in no matter what. Like, and that's fine, you know, like it's a really interesting sort of like place to be, but if you're not like a huge fan of video games, or like if you're a developer, there's not much of a reason for you to be there, I think.
Yeah. Well, I guess like I did want to ask you a little bit about your time there. I know like you mentioned, I mean, did you have a feeling of like what you were hoping a job at EA would be a path to, and like the point where you realized like, you know, maybe working in the industry wouldn't take you there?
I really didn't know what I wanted, like, because I was like fresh out of art school, and like I was just hungry for a job, you know, like, I love working in 3D. I just hope I do something in 3D. And like, it wasn't even like, when I got there, I was like, oh, I'm kind of just doing like like grunt work, and that's something I expected, but like I just never felt like I was learning anything new. It was just like here's the same things that I'm doing every day, like cleaning up this, like it's a very much of a production cycle sort of like environment where you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over every day and not really expanding your skills. And the same thing could be said for like VFX and like large motion film production, which I've had like a bit of dealing with as well. And it's like you just come in, like let's say if you're a compositor, right? Like that's all you're ever going to be doing. And there's a finite life cycle for a person in that industry, I feel like, where it's like you can only do it for so long. And you're either going to get burnt out or, and only so much are going to rise to the top of that industry. So a lot of people do end up like checking out eventually and kind of doing their own thing afterwards. And a lot of people I know that have gone on to do very successful things, but like have like put their time into like, that sort of production lifestyle, kind of earn some money and then kind of realize that there was no real future in it and then kind of did their own thing. So, I mean, it's a nice industry if you want to like work in it, but I don't think it's a long sustaining industry.
I would sort of agree, and I think like a lot of the systemic issues in the industry are sort of reflective of, like that first job that you had. Like I think just these companies have been able to continue in that fashion because I think people, they come in, they do their 5 years, and then either they move on or they move up. But it doesn't seem like a lot of people necessarily get to move up. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, but before we get into a lot of the stuff about gatekeeping, I'm curious to hear, like, you make stuff out on your own now, and you were part of a community of people who make stuff on their own. I'm curious, like, I've been on the press side covering stuff, but for people who are doing freelance stuff but making games instead of writing, like, what does success look like for people who are making games today on their own? Like, what are they hoping will happen?
Well, I mean, I think there's different aspects of what like success is. I think, it's like, I think that at the end of the day, you kind of want to be known as a game developer. Like you want to have a certain style or maybe a mark or a voice that resonates with people. And I think a lot of it seems like this. It could be same about saying like comic books or like people that make like zines or something like that, or like like indie comic books or anything like that, where it's just like you kind of want to be known, but for the stuff you make, and you want like people to play it really, and like I think that's a lot of why people become game developers is like to see people play their games. And it's like that's something that you can't like even describe, to like stand in the same room and see people just like ecstatic and just go crazy for stuff that you've spent hours, days, years of your life making, and then all of a sudden like you put it out there, especially to be there, to see it in person. And then all of a sudden, like, they're grabbing their friends, they're telling, like, oh, you got to come check this out. And, like, you don't even have to say anything sometimes. Like, they just bring themselves. And it's like, that's an incredible feeling. But then there's also, like, you want to have, like, large success, but I don't think that comes to everybody. That success could be like monetary, which I don't think everyone gets there, but I don't think everyone is really looking for that either, honestly. If anything, it's sustainability, but not like, oh, I hope to retire by making this one game and that's it, like, yeah. I think if you're coming into it with that sort of attitude, like you're really going to be disappointed, like,
I mean, it's such a broad, amorphous blob of people, and making games may just be like one small facet of who they are, and maybe they have this whole other career that they don't really talk about.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's
I get a sense of some of that. Like some people like sort of feel ashamed to talk about that, like, oh, they actually have like a regular job and they are actually doing this for fun, and it will be awesome just if someone sees their stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I know like AAA developers that like make small games on the side, and I mean like that, like they don't have to make these games at all, right? Like they're like, these are people that are making the next Uncharted or like something like that, but they still choose to like sit around and make these like small little side games just because I think they really, in the end of the day, still love it, like to go do this thing as a job and then come home and do it again. I think speaks a lot of volumes about like the kind of people that are like doing it, like.
Yeah, I mean, I read some of that into that, but also, like, I get the sense that, like, it's hard for people who are working on such massive projects to take ownership or in the work that they're doing.
Yeah, you're like
I don't want
in the wheel, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to paint it in such a simple, pessimistic tone, but, I don't know necessarily that there are, like, maybe, like, there are auto mechanics that fix other people's cars and then they go home and they work on a hot rod in the garage.
Yeah.
But I've never known anyone like that.
Yeah, I know.
Have you? I mean, have you?
I mean, like, maybe movies, right? Like, I don't know many people like, I do know a few people in the movie industry, but, like, they like work on sets and then they kind of do stuff on their own sometimes as well.
Yeah. Well, so this is sort of inevitable. I like to talk a little bit about how things got so serious, people got so angry in games, and I'm curious from your perspective, like, what do you find boring or really repetitive about the conversation around video games online?
I mean, like, these days I'm trying to like stay away from it more. But yeah. It's kind of like what is it? Like an echo chamber where, one person says something, and especially online, you can construe what people say to mean anything, right? And then one person takes it one way and gets really offended, and then usually gets on, like, I think like Twitter's not, like, these days I'm really kind of staying away from Twitter because I don't think it's helping really. That's just my opinion.
Not helping what? I mean, I noticed. I think you deactivated your account.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like, it's like all.
Which I wasn't spying. I was trying to do some research.
It's
I saw
people have started like spoofing my account now, which is like, whoa.
That's how you know you've really moved.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. I mean, I saw like, oh, his account's down, and I was like, oh, okay, that completely makes sense. But. So, like you said, it isn't really helping. Like, how do you mean?
There's no actual conversation being had, right? Like, it's just, like, people just spouting whatever they think, and, like, most of the time, it's like you can be as terrible as you want because there's that sort of anonymity. Like, no one will know who you are, so you can be as terrible as you want, and then that just compounds the situation of, like, people's feelings getting hurt, and then people just upping that ante as well. Like, oh, someone said something really terrible, that means I could just say something even more terrible and get away with it, right? Like, yeah. And I think and then also, like, people form these, like, little clique collectives, which it's just like, and that doesn't help either, I think. Like, you just end up alienating a lot of people, and I think overall, like, there's just no dialogue. It's just like in the end of the day, I just see it as a place to sell something or to sprout something really terrible toward other people. Like,
this is true.
Like, and maybe it's bad that I'm not on there, but for the time being, I'm like taking a break, and it just became too toxic of a place and something I just didn't want to deal with anymore,
So the weird thing about talking about the internet is, like, it's so massive, and, it's made up of all these subsystems and cliques, like you said, and I don't know how video games got to be like this. And I just have my perspective, which is I don't know how video games got to be like this. And that's part of why I'm doing this. But like, I mean, have you sort of kept an eye on it or noticed like an uptick of it? I feel like just all of a sudden it completely exploded and was completely awful. And for a long time I thought it was just me. I thought I was being an asshole. I was like, man, everyone's really boring.
You mean like kind of about how like terrible people are sometimes in the like?
Yeah. That and you know, the intersection with video games where there's, you know, another flavor to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to that anonymity, right? Like especially in like if you're playing games in like some like game communities like Call of Duty, right? Like the people are just really terrible. Like, you know, you go on there, people are dropping the N-word, being like extremely misogynistic if you're a woman, like the stuff that I didn't even realize, like the stuff that a woman had to deal with until I saw it in like person. I'm just like, wow, if I had to go through that, I'd probably not play video games. But, you know, like women want to still play video games and they still put up with it, which is, I think, you know, like really, you know, they don't have to, which is honestly terrible. But there are wonderful communities too. Like I've played a lot of TF2 and I've never seen or anything like that. And I think a lot of it's like maybe the culture around different games are different. And, you know, like either you want to join that culture or you don't. And, you know, it's sometimes bad if you do like a game and the culture doesn't fit with you. And, right. You know, like that's kind of sad. But, yeah.
Well, I mean, you were saying that in your email, the gatekeepers for game devs needs to diversify. And sort of that's where things are trickling to be so, you know, narrow and segregated. And like you said, a frat boy mentality. So who are these gatekeepers you're talking about? Are you talking about publishers or?
Well, I mean, that's another like aspect that I've like had to deal with, especially within the last 3 years of Glitch, where before, if you want to go meet anyone that makes games, right, was someplace you had to go to GDC or a convention, right, and it's the only place that you can interact with the larger gaming publishing community, right. But something very unique that happened at Glitch was we had the industry walking through our doors every day, like. You name it, they've probably walked through the doors of Glitch, like, to go check it out, just to see it, like, you know. And, like, at that point, like, within the last 3.5 years, I was interacting with, like, the larger echelons of the industry on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of it, I just noticed were, like, kind of the same people. And a lot of the same people that, like, I was like, man, these are just, like terrible business types that are just out to like make a profit and don't really care about who you are.
Like beige men in beige suits, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, they're not beige suits, but like, you know, like they try to come off as like, yeah, we're cool, but like, you know, like there's a real shallowness to it is the only way I could say it, you know, and like they're just. And if you don't look like them and talk like them and act like them, they don't want to know you, you know? And
so this would probably be a good opportunity to explain like what Glitch is for people reading who maybe don't know.
Sure. Glitch is a video game development community. I tend to think of it more of like an art space.
It's a physical place.
Yes, though. It's a physical space that a few people from former That Game Company, Giant Sparrow, and Sony Santa Monica, and also from the motion graphics industry, were getting together and talking about how they love video games and making video games. And then one day they all just decided, let's get a place and start making games together. And for a long time, it was just a few people in an office, literally unheard of. No one really knew who we were, just doing what we loved. And that was one of the most purest sort of things that I've ever done. And at the same time, I was coming off from a project, and I was pretty well off. And I was like, well, you know, this is something I've always wanted to do. Let's see how it goes. And I was very, very lucky to been there since the very beginning. And, even to this day, like, I felt like I've grown so much as an artist from being there. And so and then eventually it kind of blew up after a year of being around. Like, people just realized what we were doing, and it was very interesting work. And our name just got out there, and it's just been kind of snowballing ever since.
Yeah. So we'll get into a little bit about all that and why you used the past tense a couple of minutes ago. But so how are these spaces different on the inside from how they are presented or look on the outside?
I think, like, the way they're presented is very much like a very, like, I've heard of a lot of it. Like, one of my close friends, Brendan Chung, has said, "Oh, people at Glitch think we're a bunch of, or people think that at Glitch we're a bunch of hippies that make video games." And I always, like, that's a statement that I found really funny, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I guess that's kind of true. So basically, we're all like kind of singular game developers that, although we're working on different projects, we're able to help each other out, because we have a lot of strengths, right? Like I have a lot of technical knowledge, like Brendan just has a lot of incredible design knowledge, and other people come in with artistic backgrounds, and we end up helping each other out and filling the gaps sometimes that where other people are lacking, and in turn we're able to also, like, as a collective, help each other out. So, like, if one of our games come out, we're able to, like, basically we all kind of talk about it, and then in turn gets the larger, like, awareness of the game out there.
Yeah. So, I'm curious because this is something I'll never be able to know. But I mean, what is it like to be a non-white in an alternative art space?
It's funny because when Glitch started, it was a very diverse community, and Seiji Tanaka was one of the former members who created a game called that Journey from that game company. Asked me to come join Glitch City when it was first being founded, and it was a very different experience, especially even coming from motion graphics at the time, which I was doing, because that was predominantly what, like, all, especially white males, really. And you get that in the tech industry. That's something, like, even, like, there was times where I'd be the first person of color in the entire office ever, right?
Yeah.
And, and that was partly because, I had to work my ass off. Like, my portfolio showed it. Like, I've had to, like, work harder just to keep up, but nonetheless, but also made me a better person for it as well. But first coming into Glitch, that was one of the interesting facts, was, like, it was a very diverse community. But once we started getting a bit of notoriety and started getting bigger, then all of a sudden the entire the dynamics of the space changed, where all of a sudden it's only white males that are now being accepted into Glitch, where all of a sudden there was a cutoff. And honestly, if it was today, if I was to try to get into Glitch, I probably wouldn't, which is really sad. And that, and that ended up causing a lot, in the end of the day, it caused a lot of issues.
So how do people act stupid in game spaces racially? And I'm not only asking about white people, but I'm curious of what your perceptions are of that. We talked a lot about this, especially between Seiji and a good friend of mine, Akira Thompson, who is also part of Glitch. And I equated it to, let's say if you go to a restaurant, right? And you okay.
You go with your friends, right? and there's the waiter. You might get his name, but there's no, like, actual, like, you're not collegial with the waiter. You're not going to be, I mean, like, it could happen, but you're not going to become best friends. You're not going to want to get the waiter's information because they're there to do a job, right? They're there to help you out and basically, like, provide for you and get you out the door as well, right?
Right, to do a job.
Right.
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, like, no matter who you were, when you were a person of color, you only get treated like the waiter, right? No one wants to know who you are. No one cares about what you're doing. They rarely even talk to you. And it's gotten to the point where there was people coming in through the space that, like, the first time it's like, oh, it's a coincidence, you know, like, maybe they just didn't have anything to say. The second time you're like, oh, maybe that's weird. Third time you're like, oh, that's weird. 3 years, you're like, oh man, this is really wrong. And then at the same time, it's like, oh, maybe it's just me. And then all of a sudden you start asking at the other people of color at Glitch, and they're like, yeah, they just don't want to associate with us. Like, that's how it goes, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I know Seiji, and I talked to him as well, and we talked over the summer, and he used the restaurant analogy as well, and he said it's just like, people, I don't know if it was a Glitch or otherwise, just like you would just see pictures on Facebook and it would be like, oh, here's all the white people from Glitch hanging out and they didn't invite me.
Yeah.
That's weird. Is it stuff like that you're talking about?
I mean, like, that, like, yeah, that's, I mean, that's,
and I don't want to make it seem like, you know, like I'm trying to go after Glitch.
No. I mean, like, yeah, that's the external, like, yeah, you see that there's a physical, actual proof of this now happening, right? Like, you see on Twitter, especially on Twitter, like, that was another reason where I was just like, I don't care for this anymore because no matter what I do, these people will never respect me or even care for anything I'm doing, right? Like, yeah, they just don't care about you. You're not even a human being to them. Even, like, sharing an office sometimes with these people, they still don't want to care. Like, they don't, no matter how much you've done for them, no matter how many things you've helped them out, they're just there to use you and kind of throw you aside and never even associate with you once even the larger outside. So like you're not even a human being, and like you still get that treatment inside as well. And that was when it started getting toxic.
Yeah.
Right. Like to have these people coming in every day and just not even thinking, like treating you like you're exist in the space, like you're just the pink elephant in the room that they have to sidestep around, and it literally, like, it's soul crushing, you know, and like it was gross is the only, like, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but like I would never wish that sort of treatment on anybody, you know.
Do you think it's willful or unintentional?
You know, I don't know.
I feel like it starts as unintentional and then subconsciously becomes willful.
Like, but at the first time, you want to say that it's unintentional, right? But like,
yeah. But you can't unintentionally do something for 3 years.
Yeah, like, yeah, I know. How can, like, exactly, right? Like, and these are people that, like, you're like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah from that major publication. That's, you know, that's that person that owns that giant company, you know? Yeah. And it's like, these aren't just random people. These are just, like, very connected people that are just like, I don't need to associate with you because you do not look like the kind of person that are supposed to be in the video game industry. And in the end of the day, then you realize, like, no matter what you do in that space, like, you're worthless. Like, no matter what how many, like, because I was really, like, I created a lot of the events that were instrumental in getting Glitch's name out there to the public. And I see all these people at the events that I've helped throw, and they just don't want to know you. And I'm like, this is this ain't right. Like, this is not right at all. And in the end of the day, you know, it got to me, you know.